This is part 8 of the Craftsman 6x48 Belt Disc Sander Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 7, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we'll be polishing the column and doing some fabrication. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So here we have the column, and I've got it set up in what I like to call a poor man's lathe. And I'm going to be using a 80 grit flapper wheel on my angle grinder to do the initial cleaning. And if you're curious on how to construct this contraption because you don't have access to a lathe, or you don't have a lathe that can handle the size of a column in it, then just about all of my drill press rebuild video series have how to assemble this contraption and how to use it. So in any case, I basically ran the flapper wheel down the column once and then came back in the opposite direction. And then we're going to get into sanding it. So with dry sanding, we're going to be using some sanding discs on my oscillating sander. And we'll start with 80 grit because that's what we left off with on the flapper wheel. And I'm basically just going to go down the column and then switch the grit. So here I'm using 80 grit, 100 grit, 120, 150, 220, and then 320. The more steps you've got, the more sizes or grits you can apply to this, the smoother the finish will be. And the purpose here is that the grit you're working on should be removing the scratches from the previous grit. So as you get finer, you're getting less scratches in the surface. I used to do this whole thing by hand, and man, that was a pain in the butt. But the dry sanding is pretty straightforward. And this is the same process I use on all the columns that I clean up, whether they're for this project or drill press or a planer or anything like that. And by the time you get to 320, you should have a column that's got a relatively nice satin finish to it. And then we start the wet sanding. So with the wet sanding, we're going to be using 400 grit, 600, 800, and 1000. Now again, you could use more grit sizes or types in there, but 4 usually get me where I want to be. And for this, I'm going to run the sandpaper down one side and then come back up. So it's going to get 2 passes. And I'm wetting the sandpaper about every 10 inches or so. You want to keep it wet as much as possible, and then you need to rinse that column between each grit. If you don't rinse, then you're not doing anything, you're just continuing working on what you started with. The rinsing removes the grit from the previous sanding, I guess, if that makes any sense. In any case, by the time you get to 1000, you should have a relatively decent shine to that column. Now this is assuming that there wasn't a whole lot of pitting and stuff in the column, which on this column there wasn't. And after that, we're going to rinse the column off, and then we're going to dry it off with the towel. And then we're going to be applying some Mother's mag and aluminum polish. And this is what takes it from the current shine that you see here to a chrome-like finish. So I'm just using a rag to apply the polish, and then I've got a ShamWow sitting there off in the corner. And that's what we're going to use to polish with. So this stuff is magic. I mean, I can't say it enough. It does a phenomenal job. So here we just take the ShamWow and run it down one side. Then we're going to come back. And there you go. And that's got a real nice finish to it. So then we'll remove all of that from the workbench, and then we've got the column, and I'm just going to use Johnson's paste wax here, and we're going to apply this paste wax to the outside of the column, and this will work as a rust inhibitor. I do this with all of my columns, and I live in a very high humidity environment in Georgia. So I usually will be able to reapply this paste wax to my columns on my drill presses and stuff about once every year or two, and it keeps them from rusting. No problem at all. So after we apply that paste wax, then we're just going to buff it off, and that is the column. So we'll set that aside. So next we need to fabricate this piece here. This is the work table support arm, and it's essential for the table to have something to brace itself on so that it's level when you angle it or set it up against that sanding belt. Now, this table is like the earliest design of these type of belt disc sanders that were made for Craftsman, and the design with the wedge part that I'm putting together right here is way more complicated than it needs to be, and to be honest, I'm probably just going to eliminate it completely because it's not doing what it's supposed to do very well, which is support that support bracket, which is kind of the triangular thing to the left there. So the way this is supposed to work is you turn that knob and it pushes that wedge up under the support arm and gives it some rigidity. But the support bracket that we're going to be fabricating runs from the arm to the bottom side of the table. You'll see me grab a ruler here in a minute and measure that distance. And that makes way more sense as far as adjusting the table, and actually later designs eliminate that knob and that wedge piece altogether. So I think this bracket, once we fabricate it and figure out how we're going to connect it to these two pieces, the table and the support bracket, will be a much better and more rigid system than that wedge. So I think I measured about 4.5 inches is what I want to work with here. This is some 1/8 inch thick, 1 1/4 inch wide steel, mild steel. You can get it at your Home Depot or whatever. So I'm going to measure off this, and I think I said 4.5, yeah. So we'll cut that piece out. Get a nice straight line there. So, and I tried to show as much of this process as possible just to give anybody that's looking to do any kind of fabrication an idea of kind of the workflow or whatever. And I'm not a professional in any way, so you know, if you've got a better way to do it, then good on you. So we chop that piece off of there. Then we're going to use some of these template circles, to get an idea of where we're going to be drilling some holes and the overall shape of this part. So we know that the screws or the pivot rods that are going to be supporting this are roughly 1/4 of an inch in diameter. So we went up one size for these drilling holes, and this channel that we're going to be cutting out, so we could make sure that once we got everything cut, it was going to fit. And that's what we're going to cut out. So we'll first do the long cut. And I think I sped this up. And this is my 12-inch Craftsman bandsaw, that 2-wheel bandsaw that it was meant, for wood cutting, and I've adapted it for metal cutting. So an actual metal cutting bandsaw would cut a lot faster than this thing, but it does what I need it to do, and it looks cool. Then we'll head over to my 1-inch belt disc sander. Love this sander. We're just going to rough out these angles and curves. Get everything nice and smooth. And once I finished that, I went ahead and center punched each one of these holes that we're going to be drilling. You can't really see the part, it's down inside that vise, but I'm drilling the 3 holes. So 1 hole for the pivoting, and then 2 holes for the channel that we're going to be cutting out. And this cross slide vise really works great in applications like this, where you've got holes on one plane that you need to cut multiples of. And then here we are with my Fordham, which is basically a Dremel. I've got a cutoff wheel on it, and you can see the 3 holes that we cut out, and then we're just going to connect these 2 holes together. So I end up going through 3 or 4 of these cutoff discs. That's my dog barking at our neighbor. And yes, I could have used the mill on my metal lathe / mill to do this, but this is something that everybody could do. As long as you've got a vise and a Dremel, you can do this. Alright, so that looks kind of rough right now, no big deal. We'll head over to a different vise, my Wilton, and then we're going to clean all of these holes up. So we've got the pivot hole, which is off center of the shaft or the channel that we cut out. There's no specific measurement there, I just eyeballed it. And then we've got the channel. We'll clean those ends up, and then we'll make sure that the long part of it is nice and relatively square. We're going to clean this up with one of those sanding sponges. I have no idea what the grit is on this thing, but it's kind of aggressive, so probably like a 60 or an 80. But that'll remove most of those burrs and knock down the all the little lips and stuff. Make sure everything is absent of any sharp edges. And it will remove any of the Sharpie marker that we had on this piece. And you can paint this piece. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it raw, but it gives you an idea. Then we'll take that back over to the workbench and see if this piece is going to work. So it looks to me on the parts diagram that this support really didn't have a whole lot of, it wasn't originally considered to be a main support. And I say that because it was just a pin that mounted it to the table, and then it was connected with a screw to the triangular support bracket there with a thumb nut. And I'm going to use that same setup, but my goal here is that thumb nut is going to be the primary method of adjusting the table. And I think it's going to work out great. And it'll be way, way simpler than that stupid knob wedge setup. But in any case, all these parts are not going to get painted here, so we're just going to coat them with some super slick stuff. And that'll keep them from rusting for a while. And that is going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Don't forget about the links that are in the description of the video below. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below the video. I'll get to them as soon as I can. And as always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you guys next time.